A flight attendant disdainfully and blatantly relocated a black billionaire family to the back of the first-class cabin, thinking she was asserting her authority. However, when the plane landed, a shocking truth was revealed. They were the owners of the airline. What happened next would make her confront the biggest mistake of her life. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. If you love this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful and meaningful tales. Sarah Collins, 30 years old, walked confidently through Skylux Airlines' first-class cabin. Promoted to first-class flight attendant 2 years ago, Sarah saw it as proof of her hard work and talent. Each flight was an opportunity to show that she belonged among the elite, not just as a server, but as part of this luxurious space. Wearing her crisply ironed uniform, her hair neatly tied back, and her professional smile perfectly in place, Sarah always appeared flawless, just as expected by this prestigious airline. That evening, Flight 512 from New York to Paris was ready for takeoff. The first-class passenger list included names Sarah knew were important: a renowned investor, an Oscar-winning director, and a few powerful business people. Sarah double-checked her notes on her tablet. Everything had to be perfect. First-class service wasn't just an experience, it was an art. She had spent years observing senior colleagues, mastering how to provide service that made the wealthy feel exalted, like royalty. As the boarding door opened, Sarah greeted each passenger with a professional smile. The expensive suits, polished leather shoes, and designer handbags accompanied by the familiar aura of people accustomed to wealth made them easy to recognize. But when a family of 4 stepped in, Sarah's brow slightly furrowed. They didn't fit the profile of anyone on her usual passenger list. The man, Michael Williams, wore a simple navy suit, understated and without any flair. The woman, Vanessa, was dressed in an elegant cream-colored dress, her face exuding confidence yet warmth. Their 2 children, a boy of about 7 and a girl around 5, stood quietly by their parents. No loud voices, no attempts to draw attention. The family moved forward with discreet confidence. Sarah glanced at their tickets. First class, seats 1A and 1B. An uncomfortable feeling rose within her. They didn't look like the kind of people she usually saw in first class. No gold watches, no designer leather bags, nothing to suggest they belonged in this space. Sarah wondered if their tickets were the result of an upgrade program, or worse, perhaps a system error. As they approached, Sarah gave a reflexive smile, but her eyes lingered on their tickets longer than usual. "Excuse me, I need to double-check your ticket information," she said, her voice polite, but missing the warmth she had extended to the other passengers. Michael handed her the tickets, his expression calm. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice low but clear, as if he sensed something was off. Sarah glanced at the tickets again, even though she already knew they were valid. She couldn't find any errors, but her unease persisted. "Just a routine check, sir," she replied, quickly turning away. Vanessa gently placed a hand on Michael's shoulder as he started to say something more. Their eyes met in silent agreement. Both took a step back, holding their children's hands, allowing Sarah to proceed with her check. Sarah went to the service desk where her colleague Megan was stationed. Leaning in, she lowered her voice. "That family, they don't really look like first-class passengers. Do you think their tickets were upgraded?" Megan frowned but didn't respond immediately. She looked at the system and shook her head. "Their tickets are valid. They booked well in advance and paid in full. Is there a problem?" Sarah felt her face heat up. "No, it's just, they don't seem like the usual first-class type," she muttered before heading back. Part of her felt embarrassed for asking, but another part couldn't shake her suspicion. They didn't belong in this space. Something felt off. When she returned, Sarah forced a polite but not particularly friendly smile. "Follow me, please," she said, leading them to their seats. But instead of placing them in the prime first-class seats with the best views, Sarah directed them to the last row near the restroom. These seats, while still technically first class, were far from the convenience and comfort of the central area. Michael and Vanessa followed without complaint. Vanessa gently guided her daughter into her seat and buckled her in, while Michael silently placed their bag in the overhead compartment before sitting beside his wife. Not a word of protest, not a look of reproach. They simply watched as Sarah walked away. Sarah felt the silence like an unspoken reprimand, but chose to ignore it. She told herself she was doing the right thing. Maybe they had found some way to get into first class. First class wasn't a place to test generosity. As she returned to the service area to prepare for the next wave of passengers, Sarah was unaware that her actions had been noticed by the discerning eyes of those around her. Another passenger, Robert Sterling, seated a few rows ahead, frowned as he observed her behavior. To Robert, Sarah's lack of warmth wasn't just a mistake. It hinted at something deeper. The plane was ready for takeoff, but for Sarah, this wasn't just another flight. It would be the flight that changed her life forever. The plane trembled slightly as it took off, and the lights in the first-class cabin dimmed, creating a quiet and luxurious atmosphere. Sarah moved down the rows of seats, greeting passengers and serving drinks. Her gaze frequently darted toward the back of the cabin, where the Williams family was seated. Michael was engrossed in a book. Vanessa was helping their young daughter flip through a coloring book, while their young son quietly played a game on a tablet. They weren't doing anything remarkable, but their silence held Sarah's attention in an inexplicable way. She told herself she needed to keep an eye on them, to ensure they didn't cause any trouble. Yet, deep down, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. A part of her knew they hadn't done anything wrong, but she couldn't explain why she felt so uneasy. "Sarah, the table over there needs more wine," Megan, her co-worker, reminded her, noticing her standing absent-mindedly. Sarah snapped out of her thoughts, trying to mask her embarrassment. She returned to her duties, bringing a glass of wine to an elderly passenger seated in the front row. But as soon as that task was complete, her eyes involuntarily wandered back to the Williams family. They remained silent. As time passed, Sarah's unease morphed into something resembling irritation. Why were they here? Why weren't they complaining? Why did they look so calm? These questions kept replaying in her mind. To Sarah, their composure felt like a subtle challenge to the authority she believed she held over this cabin. When dinner service began, Sarah and Megan prepared meals for the passengers. Gourmet dishes like grilled salmon and Wagyu beef were served in succession. With her experience, Sarah instinctively prioritized serving the passengers seated near the front of the cabin first, following an unspoken rule she had learned. Those in the center were always the most important. The Williams family's row was last on the list. When Sarah brought their meals, Michael glanced up at her. He said nothing, merely lifting the tray and placing it on the table in front of him. Vanessa, seated beside him, gave a polite smile, but its courtesy cut like a sharp blade in Sarah's mind. No complaints, no visible attitude, yet their silence made her feel judged. Returning to the front, Sarah met Megan in the galley. Megan looked at her with mild curiosity. "What's up with you? You've been staring at that family the whole time." "Don't you think they're odd?" Sarah whispered, trying to conceal her irritation. "They don't seem like first-class passengers at all. I think they found a way to get upgraded." Megan frowned. "They have valid tickets. Why are you nitpicking?" "It's just a feeling," Sarah muttered, glancing back toward them. "I've seen plenty of people cheat their way into this cabin before. I just want to make sure everything's fine." Megan sighed and shook her head. "Maybe you should focus on your job instead of your hunches." Sarah said nothing. She knew Megan was right, but she couldn't suppress the growing discomfort inside her. It felt as though the Williams family's presence in this familiar space was somehow out of place. Later, when Michael pressed the call button to ask for more water for his daughter, Sarah deliberately let Megan respond instead. She stayed in the galley, as if wrestling with her own thoughts. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just doing my job." But passengers are not oblivious. A man seated near the front, Robert Sterling, had been observing her behavior since boarding. As Sarah walked past, Robert raised his hand to get her attention. Reluctantly, she stopped, her smile striving to remain professional. "Sir, how can I assist you?" she asked, her tone light. Robert looked at her with sharp eyes. "You seem very busy, but I couldn't help noticing that the family at the back received their meals quite late. Is there a reason for that?" Sarah froze for a moment, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Oh, we're just serving according to procedure," she replied, trying to sound composed. "It's nothing intentional. They were simply at the end of the list." Robert's lips curled into a faint smile, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "Is that so? I thought first class was a place where all passengers were treated equally. Or am I mistaken?" A wave of embarrassment washed over Sarah, but she didn't respond. "Thank you for your feedback, sir. I'll take it into consideration," she said quickly before turning away, eager to avoid further discussion. As she walked away, Robert's words echoed in her mind. A place where all passengers are treated equally. Or am I mistaken? For a fleeting moment, Sarah felt the confidence she usually carried waver. Elsewhere in the cabin, Michael sat quietly gazing out the window, but his eyes occasionally flickered toward Sarah. He said nothing, but his silent observation only heightened her discomfort. The flight dragged on for hours, but for Sarah, it felt like an endless internal battle between her self-assurance and her growing insecurity. She had no idea that the watchful eyes following her actions, from Robert, from Michael, from Vanessa, were about to uncover a truth she had never anticipated. Sarah tried to stay calm as she continued moving through the first-class cabin. The weight on her shoulders felt heavy, not just from the watchful eyes of the passengers, but also from an inner turmoil she couldn't fully understand. The Williams family remained seated quietly at the back of the cabin, showing no signs of discomfort or concern. Yet to Sarah, their calm demeanor felt like an unsettling reminder that they knew more than she assumed. Meanwhile, Robert Sterling, the sharply dressed man in the front row, continued observing Sarah's behavior. He noticed not only the delay in how she served the Williams family, but also her cautious glances whenever she passed by them. He lightly tapped his wine glass, signaling her to come over. "Sir, is there anything I can assist you with?" Sarah asked, trying to maintain her composure. Robert leaned slightly toward her, his voice low and sharp. "How long have you been working in first class?" Sarah was momentarily taken aback by the question. "About 2 years, sir," she replied, a hint of unease in her tone. "Then you must know this cabin isn't just for people who look the part, correct?" Robert said, his piercing gaze unwavering. It felt as though someone had stripped away Sarah's facade of confidence. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, striving to keep her voice steady. "I noticed that the family in the last row received their food and drink significantly later than everyone else," Robert remarked, his eyes fixed on her. "That doesn't align with the standard of service Skylux prides itself on." Sarah forced a smile, though it felt far from genuine. "We serve based on the order in the manifest, sir. There's nothing personal about it." Robert leaned back in his seat, a faint, knowing smile on his lips. "The order in the manifest, or perhaps your feelings about who belongs here?" A tightness gripped Sarah's chest. She couldn't respond immediately. Robert's words had struck at something she was desperately trying to suppress. "Thank you for your feedback," Sarah said quickly, cutting the conversation short. She turned and walked away, but she could still feel Robert's gaze burning into her back. As Sarah tried to carry on with her duties, other passengers in the first-class cabin began to notice the difference in how she treated the Williams family. Some glanced at the family, then back at Sarah, as if trying to piece together what was going on. The atmosphere in the cabin grew tense, though no one said anything outright. At the back of the cabin, Michael Williams quietly observed. Vanessa, seated beside him, gently touched his hand, signaling reassurance. "Let her reveal herself," Vanessa whispered, her tone calm but laden with meaning. Michael nodded slightly, his gaze fixed ahead where Sarah was busily tending to other passengers. For him, patience wasn't just a way to stay composed. It was his greatest weapon. He knew that Sarah's actions would ultimately speak for themselves. In the small galley, Sarah retreated to compose herself. Megan was arranging cups of coffee when she turned to Sarah with a concerned look. "Are you okay? I've noticed you've been focusing on that family all flight." Sarah picked up a tray, avoiding Megan's eyes. "I'm fine. I just think there's something off about them." "Off?" Megan raised an eyebrow. "You mean because they don't look like the other passengers?" "Not exactly," Sarah replied, her voice trailing off. "I just feel like they don't fit in this cabin." Megan stared at Sarah, disappointment flickering in her expression. "Sarah, I think you're letting your feelings cloud your judgment. They have valid tickets. They've done nothing wrong. So why are you treating them differently?" Sarah didn't respond, but Megan's words left her feeling unsettled. "I'm not wrong," she told herself. "I'm just doing my job." Deep down, though, Sarah knew that wasn't entirely true. It felt as if everything was conspiring against her. Robert's pointed remarks, the Williams family's calm demeanor, and Megan's quiet admonishments. Every small detail seemed to push her closer to a confrontation she wasn't ready to face. Up at the front of the cabin, Robert set down his wineglass and stood up. He walked slowly toward the back, where the Williams family was seated. Sarah watched him, her heart pounding. What is he going to do? She wondered, a growing sense of dread building within her. Robert stopped beside Michael and leaned down, saying something to him. Michael looked up, nodded slightly, and smiled. No one else could hear their exchange, but when Robert returned to his seat, there was a satisfied look on his face, as though he had made an important decision. Sarah felt as if she were walking a tightrope, any wrong step threatening to send her plummeting. Yet, instead of adjusting her course, she kept evading the inevitable. She didn't realize that her every move was being scrutinized. not just by the Williams family but by other passengers as well, and none of them seemed pleased. Sarah tried to maintain her composure as the flight settled into a steady course. However, inside, she was in turmoil. From Robert Sterling's sharp gaze to the uncomfortable silence of the Williams family, everything seemed to push Sarah to the edge. She reassured herself that she had done nothing wrong. She was merely acting on instinct, following her feelings. Yet, no matter how much she justified her actions, an unsettling sense of doubt crept into her thoughts. Meanwhile, Michael Williams sat calmly at the back of the cabin. He quietly exchanged a few words with Vanessa before standing up and heading toward the front of the plane. Sarah caught a glimpse of him as he passed by and immediately felt her heart tighten. What was he up to? She tried to ignore it, but her eyes couldn't stray from Michael's figure. Michael went straight to the cockpit door. Instead of knocking, he had a brief conversation with a nearby flight attendant, who promptly informed the captain. Moments later, Captain Peter Harris appeared and shook Michael's hand formally. They spoke in hushed tones, just enough to avoid drawing attention. Sarah couldn't hear anything, but she sensed something important was happening. When Michael returned to his seat, he didn't look at Sarah but exchanged a few words with Vanessa instead. Vanessa nodded slightly, her calm demeanor remaining intact. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her chest. What had she done wrong? As the plane landed in Paris, Sarah hurried to prepare for passenger disembarkation. Her professional smile returned, though inside she was struggling to keep up appearances. Passengers began filing out of the cabin one by one. Robert Sterling was among the first to leave. He paused briefly in front of Sarah, his piercing eyes suggesting he had something to say, but instead he just offered a faint smile and walked away. Finally, the Williams family stood up. Michael glanced at Sarah, giving her a faint, enigmatic smile. "Thank you for the flight," he said calmly. Vanessa nodded as well, her gaze steady. "I hope the service will be more complete next time." Sarah managed a forced smile and bowed slightly. She didn't know what to say. As the Williams family exited the cabin, Sarah felt as if the weight of the entire flight was pressing down on her shoulders. But the worst was yet to come. As soon as the flight ended, a colleague informed Sarah that Captain Harris wanted to see her in the cockpit. She nodded, the anxiety in her chest intensifying. Taking a deep breath, she adjusted her uniform and stepped into the cockpit. Captain Harris sat with a serious expression, motioning for Sarah to take the seat opposite him. "Sarah," he began, his tone calm but heavy, "I need to talk to you about the family seated in the last row of first class." Sarah felt her breath catch. "Yes, Captain," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Captain Harris leaned back, crossing his arms. "The Williams family is not just any ordinary passenger. They are the new owners of Skylux Airlines. They finalized their acquisition of the company just a few weeks ago." Sarah's face flushed hot, as though someone had slapped her. The new owners?" she stammered, barely able to believe what she was hearing. "That's correct," Captain Harris confirmed, his gaze fixed on her. "They were on this flight to evaluate our services, particularly in first class, and I've just received their feedback." Sarah sat frozen, feeling as if everything around her was collapsing. She wanted to say something in her defense but didn't know where to start. Captain Harris continued, his voice sharpening. "They noticed that your treatment of them was different from how you served other passengers. They didn't make a big fuss, but their feedback was clear. Your attitude was not only unprofessional, but also appeared biased." Sarah wanted to explain that it wasn't intentional, that she was simply following her instincts. But as she met Captain Harris's stern eyes, she realized that any justification would be futile. "Do you understand how serious this situation is?" Captain Harris asked, his tone icy. "Your behavior not only upset them but also tarnished Skylux's reputation. We are a luxury airline, and any hint of discriminatory treatment is utterly unacceptable." Sarah nodded, her eyes beginning to well up with tears. I didn't know who they were, Captain. I didn't mean to." Her voice cracked. Captain Harris crossed his arms, his expression unchanging. "That's irrelevant. Every passenger, regardless of who they are, deserves respect and equal treatment. This is a core principle of Skylux, and you violated it." He sighed, as though he had said everything that needed to be said. "The Williams family has requested to meet with you at the airport. I suggest you prepare yourself." Sarah felt as if her heart had sunk into a bottomless pit. She nodded weakly and left the cockpit on trembling legs. The corridor leading to the VIP lounge felt endless, each step heavier than the last. One thought burned clearly in her mind. The career she had spent her youth building might end here. Sarah walked slowly down the corridor leading to the VIP lounge at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Despite trying to take deep breaths to calm herself, her mind was a storm of emotions. Each step on the cold, tiled floor echoed in her thoughts, growing heavier with every move. Before the automatic doors to the VIP lounge opened, Sarah adjusted her uniform, striving to maintain a professional demeanor, even as anxiety surged within her. Inside, Michael and Vanessa Williams sat on luxurious leather chairs. Michael lounged comfortably, one hand resting on the armrest, while Vanessa sat upright, her hands clasped neatly on her lap. The air in the room was so silent it felt suffocating. There was no sign of their two children. They had been taken elsewhere by a caretaker. It was just the two of them now, fully focused on the confrontation. "Sarah, have a seat," Michael said, his deep, commanding voice breaking the silence. He gestured to the chair opposite them. Sarah sat down, her hands gripping the edge of her uniform jacket to hide their trembling. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp yet courteous. "You know why we wanted to meet you, don't you?" she asked, her tone light but weighted. Sarah lowered her head and gave a small nod. "Yes, I understand," she murmured, her throat tightening. Michael studied her intently, his eyes bright but free of anger. "I want to hear it from you. What do you think the issue is?" Sarah hesitated, carefully choosing her words. I think I behaved inappropriately toward your family. I apologize for not serving you fairly," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Vanessa tilted her head, her gaze probing. "Unfairly? Be more specific, Sarah. What do you believe caused you to treat us differently?" Sarah lifted her head to meet Vanessa's eyes but quickly looked away. She knew she couldn't avoid the question. I think I let unconscious bias affect my behavior," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I looked at you and I didn't think you belonged in first class." The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Vanessa didn't respond immediately. She glanced at Michael, who gave a small nod before turning her attention back to Sarah. "Unconscious bias. You thought that just because we didn't look like the passengers you usually encounter, we didn't belong here. Is that right?" Vanessa's voice was razor sharp. Sarah couldn't respond. She only lowered her head further. Michael took a deep breath, breaking the tense silence. We've dealt with this many times, Sarah. The suspicious looks, unnecessary questions, behaviors that others think are minor but reveal so much about how they view us." He leaned back, his voice deliberate and firm. "But what disappoints me the most isn't what you did. It's how you convinced yourself that you had the right to do it." Sarah felt exposed, as though every defense she'd built had been stripped away. She didn't know what to say to salvage the situation. I didn't mean to," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Vanessa shook her head, her tone now filled with disappointment. "You didn't mean to, but the harm was real. The way you looked at us, as if we were intruders, as if we didn't deserve to be in first class. This isn't just about us, Sarah. It's about how you see people based on appearances and how that affects the way you treat them." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady and resolute. "Do you know why we bought Skylux, Sarah? We wanted to build an airline that wasn't just known for its luxury, but was a place where everyone felt respected, no matter who they were. You represent that value on every flight. But what we saw today shows that Skylux still has a long way to go." Sarah felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under her. She had failed not only the Williams family but also the values Skylux prided itself on. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady herself. "I'm sorry. I truly am," she said, her voice cracking. "I know an apology can't undo what's happened, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." Vanessa observed Sarah for a moment before giving a small nod. "The question isn't what you're willing to do now. It's whether you're willing to change how you see people," she said, her voice sharp but not unkind. "That isn't easy, Sarah, but if you don't change, what you did today won't just be a mistake. It will become who you are." Michael stood, signaling the conversation was over. "We'll report this incident to Skylux Corporate. They'll decide what happens next. But remember this, Sarah, your actions weren't just a small error. They were a reflection of something much bigger, and that has no place in the culture we're trying to create." Sarah sat there, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, unable to say anything more. As the Williams family left the room, she felt as though her entire world had crumbled. But deep down, she knew they were right. If she didn't change, her career and her character would forever be defined by this moment. When the door to the VIP room closed behind the Williams family, Sarah remained motionless in her chair. Michael and Vanessa's words echoed in her mind like an undeniable verdict. Guilt, shame, and panic intertwined, engulfing her in an emotional storm. She couldn't believe she had allowed a single workday to become the worst turning point of her career. The very next morning, an email from Skylux Corporate appeared in Sarah's inbox. Its contents were brief but heavy. She was immediately suspended, pending an investigation. Sarah stared blankly at her computer screen, her eyes fixed on the words, "suspended." This was her worst fear, and now it had become a reality. In the days that followed, Sarah felt as though everything around her was falling apart. Her daily routine, waking up early, putting on her crisp uniform and stepping into the first-class cabin with confidence, was now gone. Instead, she spent her days in her small apartment, drowning in chaotic thoughts. She wasn't just afraid of losing her job, she was also grappling with a painful truth. She had allowed unconscious biases to shape her behavior, harming others and tarnishing her company's reputation. One evening, when loneliness became unbearable, Sarah picked up her phone and dialed Lauren's number, her younger sister. Lauren was a diversity and inclusion consultant at a large corporation. The two sisters weren't particularly close, as Sarah had often dismissed Lauren's work as idealistic lectures, disconnected from reality. But now, Sarah felt the need to listen. The phone rang twice before Lauren answered. "Sarah?" Lauren's cautious voice revealed her surprise at the unexpected call. "Lauren, I need to talk," Sarah said, her voice weak. I made a huge mistake." Lauren was silent for a moment before asking, "What are you talking about?" Sarah took a deep breath and began recounting everything. She didn't try to justify or downplay her actions. When she finished, she felt as though a massive weight had been lifted, leaving behind an empty void. "Lauren, I don't know what to do. I think I've ruined everything." Lauren remained silent for a long moment before responding, her voice calm but firm. "Sarah, the first thing you need to understand is that admitting your mistake is an important step, but it's only the first step. You can't expect an apology to fix everything. What you need to do now is start learning how to change." Sarah sat still, stunned. "Change? But how do I even begin?" Lauren replied, "Start by exploring your own biases. Read, learn, and listen to the stories of others. And most importantly, accept that change is a long and challenging process. Are you ready?" Sarah felt her chest tighten. She knew Lauren was right. I'm ready," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. In the weeks that followed, Sarah began a journey of self-reflection and learning. She enrolled in an online course about unconscious bias and its impact on behavior. The initial lessons made her uncomfortable, not because of the content, but because they forced her to confront herself. She realized that the biases she had dismissed as harmless were the root of many of her wrong actions. Alongside learning, Sarah joined online forums on diversity and inclusion. She read stories of people who had experienced discrimination, stories eerily similar to what the Williams family had endured. One post particularly struck her. A woman described being denied access to luxury services simply because her appearance didn't fit the wealthy stereotype. Sarah felt as if a spotlight had been shone on her own failings. She began to understand the pain her behavior could cause, but the journey wasn't just theoretical. One day, Lauren gave her some practical advice. Do something real. Instead of just learning, take action. Sarah decided to reach out to a nonprofit organization that promoted workplace inclusion. She sent an email, honestly recounting her story and expressing her desire to contribute. The response from the organization surprised Sarah. Their representative not only agreed to meet her, but also encouraged her. "We need people who are willing to face their mistakes and work to change. Come and share your story." On her first day of volunteering, Sarah felt nervous. She didn't know how she would be received, but she knew this was something she needed to do. During her first sharing session, she told her story, her wrongful actions toward the Williams family, her disappointment in herself, and her journey toward making amends. Sarah's story not only resonated with the audience but also drew empathy from those who had faced discrimination themselves. One participant said, "Thank you for your honesty. Not everyone has the courage to admit their mistakes and change." Those words felt like a light in Sarah's stormy darkness. She knew her journey was far from over, but at least she was on the right path. As the days turned into months, Sarah became a different person. She didn't just learn. She applied what she had learned in her daily life. She realized that true change wasn't just about fixing mistakes but committing to new values: respect, humility, and the ability to see others with fairness. With each step forward, Sarah felt she was not only making amends to the Williams family, but also to herself. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future. And that was what she was determined to do. Months passed, and Sarah's transformative journey turned her into an entirely different person. The guilt that consumed her in the beginning was now replaced by determination. She had not only learned to acknowledge her mistakes, but also committed to using them as a driving force for change. Sarah became an active volunteer at the nonprofit organization she had once reached out to. At first, she assisted with logistics and organized small workshops. However, thanks to her sincerity and unique story, she was soon invited to speak at discussions about unconscious bias and its impact on corporate culture. Her stories weren't lessons from textbooks, they were raw, personal experiences that touched the hearts of her audience. One day, Sarah decided she needed to write a letter to the Williams family. She knew they might never read it, but it was an essential step in her journey of redemption. In the letter, she not only apologized but also thanked them for forcing her to confront herself. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Williams, I want to begin with my sincerest apologies. My behavior on that flight was not only unprofessional but deeply hurtful to your family. But there is something else I want to say. Thank you. Because of you, I was compelled to face a part of myself that I had never acknowledged before. Over the past few months, I've spent my time learning, listening, and changing. I know that an apology cannot undo what happened, but I hope you can see my genuine effort to become a better person. I'm not doing this just for myself, but to ensure that no one else ever has to endure a similar experience. I hope that one day, if we ever meet again, I can show you how much I've learned from my mistakes. Sincerely, Sarah Collins. The letter was sent off with a sense of relief. Sarah didn't expect a response, as she understood that her actions moving forward were what truly mattered. Her work at the nonprofit opened new doors for Sarah. One day, she was invited to participate in a large conference on fostering inclusivity in the workplace, where experts from various fields would share their stories. Sarah was asked to be the keynote speaker, recounting her journey. Standing before a large audience, Sarah stepped onto the stage with a newfound confidence. Not the arrogance of her past, but the confidence of someone who had truly learned from their mistakes. She recounted her story without hiding or sugarcoating any details. She shared her shame, guilt, and the long months of self-reflection. What I've learned, Sarah told the audience, is that we all carry unconscious biases. The key is not to pretend they don't exist, but to learn to recognize them, challenge them, and overcome them. My mistake was the most costly lesson of my life, but it was also the opportunity for me to become a better person. The audience was silent, then erupted into applause. Many approached her after the conference, sharing how her story inspired them to reflect on their own lives. The day after the conference, Sarah received a letter from Skylux Airlines. In it, the leadership thanked her for her contributions to promoting cultural change within the corporate world. They invited her to join their diversity and inclusion advisory team, helping Skylux become a leading airline in creating a welcoming and equitable environment for everyone. Sarah was deeply moved, but knew this was just the beginning. She accepted the invitation, not to reclaim personal glory, but to contribute to a larger goal, building a better world through the lessons she had learned. Years later, Sarah was no longer a flight attendant. Instead, she became a speaker, consultant, and inspiration. Her story, from a monumental mistake to a journey of redemption and transformation, became a symbol of growth and the ability to overcome oneself. At one seminar, an attendee asked her, "If you could go back to that day, what would you do differently?" Sarah smiled and replied, "I would see the Williams family as people, not through the lens of my bias. But what's more important is that I no longer need to go back to that day. I've learned the most valuable lesson. It's never too late to change." As Sarah stepped off the stage to thunderous applause, she felt a rare sense of peace. She had not only made amends with the Williams family, but also with herself. And with every step forward, she knew her journey of learning and growth would continue. This time, however, she walked with genuine confidence, the confidence of someone who had learned to view the world with an open heart. When Sarah stepped off the stage, the applause still echoed through the space. But what lingered deep within her wasn't pride or acclaim. It was a sense of peace, a peace that came from finally understanding that everyone makes mistakes, but how we confront and correct those mistakes is what truly defines us. Sarah's story wasn't just a journey of personal redemption. It served as a powerful reminder that prejudice, whether intentional or not, can cause profound harm. At the same time, it affirmed that change is entirely possible. All we need is the courage to face ourselves, the patience to learn, and the determination to act. Sarah knew her journey didn't end here. The world still harbored injustice and biases that needed to be dismantled. But she also realized that change starts with small steps, with self-reflection and treating others with respect. Over time, these small ripples of change could spread, gradually shaping a better world. Sarah's story is a reminder that no one is perfect, but we all have the capacity to learn and grow into better versions of ourselves. Remember, respect and understanding are the foundations of all relationships, whether personal or societal. If this story resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share this story with your loved ones, and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful and inspiring life stories. Every subscription is a motivation for us to continue spreading positive messages to everyone. Let's work together to build a better world, starting with the smallest actions.